Hello, my name is Byron Bridges. You just saw two videos, one in which was a woman leading a class discussion using visual aids in English and American Sign Language. The other was a person using a teletypewriter and signing at the same time. Both of these are examples of bilingualism. Bilingualism is an interesting topic. People who are not deaf, otherwise known as hearing people, define this as easily being able to transition between two languages. Now, we will see how deaf people in the deaf community define bilingualism.
Bilingualism is when people have the skills in ASL and English at the same time.
Bilingualism means that a person knows two languages. In high school, I learned English and I lived at home. Home and work were two different languages. I moved to a new place and learned a new language, but use your own language at home with your family. School and home are different languages, in both places. One's French, the other German. Two languages, what does that mean? Bilingualism. For example, Mexican Sign Language and ASL. I have skill in both. I can transfer between the two if I want to. If I'm here, I use ASL. If I go to Mexico, I converse using Mexican Sign Language. Suppose I go home and converse with my friends and use MSL, but if they come here, we use ASL. That's bilingualism.
I know two languages. I know how to sign in American Sign Language and how to read and write in English. I would use ASL when interacting with others, talking about topics such as politics. I would read in English such as when I read the newspaper or when doing my homework or when watching TV with captions. I would use both of these languages with proficiency.
For me, bilingualism means understanding ASL and English. I am a hearing interpreter. I can hear spoken English and interpret it into ASL, as well as interpret ASL into spoken English.
Wow, these 2 points are very interesting. The people of the deaf community describe bilingualism as being able to communicate in both English and ASL. Hearing people describe it as being able to communicate in English and different languages like Spanish and French. Both groups agree that they are able to transition between the languages. We are seeing some similarities between the opinions of both groups. Let's see how these people became bilingual.
First, I was born deaf into a hearing family. From when I was born until the age of 17, I was skilled in English but no signing skills. I was able to write complete sentences and speak in English. When I entered college at the age of 17, I was introduced to the deaf world. I was amazed. I decided to learn ASL for 10 years. I realized the importance of ASL. ASL helped me find my true identity. Now I have skills in English and ASL. It is nice to be fluent in two languages, but I have also been learning Italian Sign Language and Quebec Sign Language. It is engaging to learn a variety of languages. It is nice to learn more than one language. Knowing 1, 2, up to 5 languages can be nice.
What does bilingualism mean to me? I was born and I grew up in Australia. The sign language we used was Auslan. Auslan is the native sign language people in Australia use. My parents are deaf, and there are many deaf families all over Australia. Growing up, I had experienced a lot of Australian language, but I wasn't exposed to a lot of English. I remembered learning how they work together, though. Whenever I wanted something as a child, I was taught to ask permission for it first. When I wanted something, I would ask my mom, and she would either tell me yes or no. I remember one day I went to my aunt's house, and we discussed different languages. I wanted an apple, so I asked my aunt if I could have it, and in response, she fingerspelled the letters Y-E-S. I was confused, because I didn't know what the letters Y-E-S meant. I asked her if Y-E-S meant yes, and she signed back the sign that meant yes. I continued to reach for the apple and made sure she meant yes. Again, she fingerspelled the letters Y-E-S, meaning yes. I put together that yes means Y-E-S, and that the letters Y-E-S mean yes. I took and ate the apple and began to understand. Since then, I have began to understand the difference between the two languages and how they work. I later moved to America, and that is when I started learning the native sign language in this country, which is American Sign Language. So far, I have learned 3 languages.
I learned 2 languages. I have deaf parents. We would have conversations when I grew up and would learn little bits at a time. I would tell them at school that I am excited to learn and go to school. School is exciting. I remember going inside, walking up the stairs and being led. I was looking around, being careful. The teacher was speaking to me slowly, and I was watching the kids, and they tested signing. I see many kids around having conversations, talking about animals, and I was scared. Saw my teacher speaking slowly, trying to get me to understand lip reading. I understand English writing and copying it down. I can sign, but you need to lead me to write English. It's different. I go home, I have conversations with the new signs with my parents, and signs are wrong. I need to change them. I need to change language, then go to school and change again. I continue to understand most, though. I grew up with Mexican Sign Language, MSL. When I was 8 years old, I moved to America and started at a deaf institute. My teacher would fingerspell, and I one time signed Enya. She said, no, that's MSL. In ASL, we use the letter N. I looked at her. MSL use Enya. ASL use N. Continued looking at her. Enya and N. It's almost the same in ASL. Oh, I understand. I'm bilingual, I understand.
I remember learning my first language around the age of 3. Up to the age of 3, I had no language. It was hard to communicate with my parents. I remember around the age of 3, a deaf couple approached me. They noticed I was deaf and started signing to me. I didn't understand at first, but I quickly picked up on it. I would start signing and understand more and more. I was learning different signs like animals such as birds. I was able to identify them and understand the signs are related to the animal. During preschool, I was in a deaf program. In the program, I was exposed to English. They would show us pictures that represents a word. I had a tough time learning the alphabet, though. In the classroom, we would use English, but outside playing, we would use ASL. I would go back and forth between the 2 languages with ease.
I grew up being able to hear and understand English. When I was about 18 to 19 years old, I became interested in learning ASL, so I took a course. I was able to sign a bit. Later, I decided to take another course and then another. Slowly, I began to improve. About 2 to 3 years ago, I became a certified interpreter, and I'm continuing to learn ASL.
So, how do these groups become bilingual? Non-deaf groups learn by listening to other languages. Deaf people learn visually. These 2 types learn differently and describe that growing up that they have had different experiences. Now, let's take a look at how they use bilingualism throughout their everyday lives.
I use both languages daily. Every day, I get up in the morning to read the paper in English. After reading the paper, I enjoy discussing what I read with other people. In sign language, we would discuss the news in the paper. For English class, we have to read and write in English, and then the class discuss it in ASL. It is normal that we don't sign English sentences. We write in English and sign in ASL daily.
I use 2 languages every day. For example, I grew up in Australia, and deaf people there use Auslan Sign Language and teletypewriters, or TTYs. While using the TTY, I communicate by typing in English, and my message goes to whomever I'm communicating with, who understands how to read and write in English. Deaf people in Australia use Auslan and transition between reading and writing within the 2 languages of Auslan and English. Let's say while I'm here in America, I become skilled in my 3rd language, which would be ASL, and learn how to transition between the 3 languages of Auslan Sign Language, American Sign Language, and English. By reading and writing in the newspaper in English, if my friends from Australia came to visit me here, I would use Australian Sign Language, and I would interpret so they can understand. So if my friends want to talk to a deaf person who uses American Sign Language, I would use American Sign Language to talk to the American deaf person, and then Australian Sign Language to talk to my Australian deaf friend. I would interpret going back and forth between the 2 languages smoothly.
I go to use 2 languages every day next year. See on TV an English interpreter. Follow along fine, no problem. I sign with my friends and understand what it means. Converse in ASL with them, and they interpret English. That's bilingualism. Yes, I use 2 languages every day. For example, in my class, my teacher gives us homework in English. I don't understand it. I ask my group to discuss it in ASL, then I understand. Then I go sit down in church and all the people are using English.
I use bilingualism every day. I went to a restaurant with my friends. We sat down to read the menu, trying to decide what we wanted to eat. I asked my friends in ASL what they wanted to eat. Then I finally decided on something and pointed to what I wanted on the menu for the waiter to see. If the waiter didn't understand, I would write it down in English and show the waiter. That is how I use bilingualism.
How do I use both languages every day? In the past, I taught English to deaf students. I would describe something in English by writing it on the board. After, I'll ask if they understood the sentences, and then I explained it in ASL. This allowed them to see it in both ASL and English, allowing the students to separate both ASL and English. This helped the students improve their skills in both languages.
People who are deaf and non-deaf people use languages differently. People who are not deaf can transition between languages while they are talking on the phone, speaking, and other ways. Deaf people use a teletypewriter by typing English in its written form through the typewriter and also through captioning, but for face-to-face communication, they will sign. As you can see, these groups of people use language in different ways, but they have similar views on what it means to be bilingual. Some of the people in the video know more than 2 languages and will now represent what they look like. Let's take a look. Oh, hello there. This is truly fascinating. I hope you learned more about bilingualism from the people in this video and that language can be used in different ways. The goal for this video was to explain to people what it means when a person knows more than one language, and encourage people to learn more languages. Some parents or school administrators are worried about deaf children and the struggle in becoming bilingual. But this video proves that deaf people can be bilingual or even trilingual. We hope to encourage more parents with deaf children to learn more languages and help support the movement of bilingualism. Thank you.